A sapphire legacy is forged in the deepest blue moments of life, preserving the wisdom of the past for the future. Join us as we explore the stories of those who built something eternal in a world that is constantly changing. Hit subscribe now and help us protect the light.
She called me on a Tuesday. Not to tell me. To ask me to watch her dog for the weekend. I found out the same way I found out about everything else in my daughter's life. Those last few years by accident. My neighbor Carol mentioned it while we were both getting the mail. She said, "Oh, I saw the photos from Rebecca's wedding. She looked beautiful." And she smiled at me like I already knew. Like I was supposed to already know. I smiled back. I said thank you. I went inside and sat down at the kitchen table and didn't move for a long time. That was a Thursday. On Friday morning I called my attorney. Let me start from the beginning, because the ending doesn't make sense without it. My name is Thomas. I'm 63 years old. I spent 31 years working construction in the same county where I was born, where my father was born, where my daughter Rebecca was born. I have hands that don't look right at dinner parties. I have a back that knows when rain is coming. I have a house I paid off in 2019. And until very recently, I had a second property, a 2-bedroom on Clover Street, that I bought as an investment in 2014 and let Rebecca live in, rent-free, from the time she was 26. Her mother and I divorced when Rebecca was 9. It was civil, as divorces go. No court battles, no poisoning the well. Karen moved to Phoenix. Rebecca stayed with me during the school year. I coached her soccer team. I drove her to piano lessons every Wednesday for 6 years, even though neither of us thought she was particularly good at it. When she got into college, I cried in the car on the way home from dropping her off. I'm not embarrassed about that. When she graduated, I helped her move into an apartment in the city. When that fell through, I told her about Clover Street. I told her she could stay there until she got back on her feet. That was 8 years ago. She never left, and I never asked her to. I wasn't looking for rent. I wasn't keeping score. She was my daughter. I bought her groceries sometimes when she was between jobs. I fixed things when they broke. I repainted the kitchen when she said the yellow was too bright. I planted roses along the front walkway because she mentioned once, years ago, that she loved roses. I thought we were close. Looking back now, I think I confused proximity with closeness. I confused doing things for someone with actually knowing them. The first sign, and I know that now, I didn't know it then, was a man named Derek. Rebecca started dating Derek about 3 years ago. She told me about him casually, the way you'd mention a new coffee shop. He worked in finance. He had an apartment downtown. He had opinions about wine and restaurants and neighborhoods in a way that made me feel, the one time I met him, like I was being quietly evaluated and had already been found lacking. We shook hands in the driveway of Clover Street. He had a firm handshake, the practiced kind, and he looked at my truck and then at me and said, "Rebecca talks about you." He didn't say what she said. He just left it there. I told myself I was being uncharitable. I told myself every father feels this way about the man his daughter brings home. I tried. 6 months after I met Derek, Rebecca stopped coming to Sunday dinners. It had been our thing for years, nothing fancy. Just whatever I made, sitting at the same table we'd eaten at since she was small. She called to cancel the first few times. Then she just stopped calling. I'd set the table, and then, around 6:30, put the extra plate away. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to be the clingy father. I didn't want to make her feel guilty. I told myself she was busy. I told myself she had her own life now. For her birthday the following spring, I made a reservation at a restaurant she'd always liked. Nothing expensive. Just a place she'd mentioned several times over the years. I left a message with Derek when she didn't answer her phone. She texted back 3 days later and said they'd already made other plans, but thank you. I went to the restaurant anyway. I sat at the bar and had the salmon and a glass of wine and talked to the bartender about baseball. It was fine. I was fine. I drove home in the dark and sat on the back porch for a while and looked at the yard. I started to understand that something had shifted. I just didn't know how far. I found out Derek's last name from the mail. He'd apparently started receiving packages at Clover Street, which meant he'd given that address as his own, which meant he was living there, which I had not been told. I didn't say anything about it because I didn't know how to say it without sounding like a landlord rather than a father, and I still wanted to be her father more than I wanted to be right. There was a family gathering that fall my brother's 60th birthday, a big dinner, the kind of thing we do once every few years when everyone makes the effort. I told Rebecca about it in August. Plenty of notice. She said she'd be there. On the day of the party, she didn't show. No call. No text until the next morning. And that one just said something came up. Sorry. Tell Uncle Ray happy birthday. I sat next to an empty chair with her name on the little card I'd made for the table settings. My brother didn't say anything. My sister-in-law patted my hand once, the way you do when there's nothing useful to say. A few months after that, I drove by Clover Street on my way back from the hardware store. I don't know why I went that way. I hadn't been by in a while. There was a car in the driveway I didn't recognize, and the roses I'd planted were gone. The bed had been paved over with gray gravel. Someone had put a wooden privacy screen over the front porch. I sat in my truck at the end of the block for a moment. Then I drove home. I want to be honest about something, because I think it matters. I kept making excuses, not to other people. I mostly kept all of this to myself, but to myself, in the quiet of my own house. I told myself she was going through something. I told myself Derek was probably just a phase. I told myself that children pull away and then come back, that it's a natural cycle, that the distance between us was temporary, and that one day she'd call and we'd have coffee and talk the way we used to. I held on to that for a long time, longer than I should have. That spring, I sent her a card for her birthday. A real card, handwritten, the kind you have to buy at an actual store. I wrote a paragraph inside, nothing dramatic, just that I loved her, that I was proud of her, that I hoped we could find some time to catch up. I signed it, Dad. She sent back a text that said, "Thanks for the card," smiley face. I put the phone down and went out to the garage and organized my toolboxes for 2 hours. I don't know why that helped. It just did. Somewhere in the middle of all this, and I want to be careful here, because I know I'm not a perfect man. And I know there were probably things I did wrong over the years, ways I failed her that I can't fully see. I started to realize that this wasn't just a phase. It wasn't Derek. Or it wasn't only Derek. Something had changed in the way she saw me. Or maybe in the way she saw herself. And I was no longer part of the life she was building. That hurt in a way I don't have clean words for. It wasn't anger, not at first. It was more like standing in a room you've been in for decades and suddenly realizing the furniture has all been moved and you don't recognize anything and you don't know when it happened. About a year ago, I started hearing things through people we both knew. Nothing confirmed, just the usual small-town static. That Rebecca and Derek had gotten serious. That they'd been looking at houses together out in Whitmore County. That Derek's family had money and they'd been spending time out there on weekends. I didn't reach out to ask. I figured if she had something to tell me, she'd tell me. She didn't tell me, Carol told me. At the mailbox, on a Tuesday afternoon, with a smile that assumed I was in on it. I went inside and I sat down and I thought about all the things I could do. I could call Rebecca and say I heard the news and congratulations, and ask why I wasn't there. I could call Derek and ask him what exactly was going on. I could drive over to Clover Street and knock on the door. I didn't do any of those things. I went to my bedroom and I opened the drawer in the nightstand where I keep the things that matter, my father's watch. A photo of Rebecca at age 7, holding a fish she caught at the lake, looking so proud she could barely stand it. And I held that photo for a while. Then I closed the drawer and I called my attorney. His name is Gerald. We've worked together for years. Good man. No nonsense. Not the type to ask more questions than necessary. I told him what I needed. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said he could have the paperwork ready within the week. Rebecca wasn't on the deed. I had never put her name on it. I'd thought about it over the years, considered it as a kind of informal inheritance, but I'd never made it official. The house on Clover Street was mine, legally and completely, and I had every right to do what I did. I listed it the following Monday. Gerald connected me with a realtor he trusted. We priced it fairly. Within 10 days, I had a serious buyer, a young couple. First home. The kind of people who stand in empty rooms and imagine what their life will look like there. I liked them. I signed the papers on a Wednesday afternoon. I told Rebecca the same day. I didn't do it to wound her. Or maybe there was some part of me that did. And I'm just not ready to say so cleanly. What I know is that I felt I had waited long enough to be treated like I existed. I felt that a person who could get married and not find 60 seconds in the weeks beforehand to make a phone call to her father had made her position clear enough. I felt that the house on Clover Street was the last thing I had given her that she hadn't already taken, and I was not going to let her take that too without knowing I had noticed. I sent her a text. I know that's not ideal. I wrote, I heard about the wedding from Carol. Congratulations to you and Derek. I want you to know that I've sold the house on Clover Street. You'll need to arrange to move out by the end of next month. I hope you're well. I put the phone on the counter and went to make dinner. She called within the hour. I let it ring. She called 4 more times that evening. On the 5th call, I picked up. She was not calm. She said I had blindsided her. She said she couldn't believe I would do something like this. She said she and Derek had been planning to stay at Clover Street while they got their finances together, that they'd had an understanding, that I was being vindictive and cruel. I listened to all of it. I let her finish. Then I said, very quietly, that I had found out about her wedding from our neighbor. I said that I had not been invited. I said that I had not been called before, during, or after. I said that I had not heard her voice in 4 months. I said that I had done a great deal for her over a great many years, and I did not regret any of it, but that the house was mine and I had chosen to sell it. And that was the end of it. She said she'd been meaning to call. She said the wedding was small, just close friends. She hadn't wanted to make it into a big thing. She said she knew I'd understand. I said, Rebecca, I am your father. I am not a neighbor you nod to in the driveway. I am your father. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said Derek's parents would have had a problem with me being there, that it was complicated, that his family was different from ours. I thought about that for a second. I thought about what it meant that my daughter had married a man whose family found me to be a complication. I thought about the photo in the nightstand drawer, a 7-year-old holding a fish like she'd caught the whole ocean. I said, I hope you'll be happy. I mean that. And I hung up. Derek called me the next morning. He was more composed than Rebecca had been, which I suppose was not surprising. He said he understood I was upset and that he respected that, but that the property decision was affecting their plans significantly and perhaps we could work something out. He said his family might be able to compensate me fairly if I was willing to reverse the sale. I let him finish. Then I said, Derek, the sale is done. And with respect, you and I don't have a relationship that warrants this conversation. And I hung up. His mother called that afternoon. I did not pick up. There were a few more attempts over the following days, texts from Rebecca that ranged from hurt to angry to apologetic and back again. A voicemail from Derek's mother that I deleted without listening to in full. My brother called to check on me after he heard something through the family grapevine, and that conversation was the most honest I'd had in months. He said, Tom, are you okay? And I said, I will be. And I meant it. I've thought a lot, in the weeks since, about whether I did the right thing. I think about the Sunday dinners I ate alone, the birthday card with the smiley face text, the empty chair at my brother's party, the roses paved over with gravel. I think about Carol at the mailbox, smiling, telling me my daughter looked beautiful, and the way I kept my face steady and said thank you. I think people can talk themselves into believing that staying quiet is the same as being patient, that absorbing pain gracefully is the same as being strong. I did that for a long time. I told myself I was being the bigger person. What I was actually doing was disappearing. Slowly, in a way that had become so gradual I'd almost stopped noticing. I don't know if Rebecca and I will find our way back to each other. I hope we do. I hope that someday she will understand what I was trying to tell her. Not with the sale, but before it. In every dinner I cooked, every drive I made, every time I fixed something at Clover Street and didn't say a word about it, I was trying to tell her that I was here, that I was real, that I was her father, and that meant something. But I have learned this, and I believe it now in a way I didn't before. You can love someone completely and still refuse to be invisible to them. Those two things can be true at the same time. The love doesn't cancel the refusal. The refusal doesn't cancel the love. The young couple closed on Clover Street on a Friday. I drove by once. The following Sunday. There was a child's bicycle on the front porch. Someone had planted flowers where the gravel used to be. I sat in my truck for a minute, the way I did before. Then I drove home, and I made dinner, and I sat at my own table, and I felt, for the first time in a long time, like a man who knew exactly where he stood.